Newshour. How will this pandemic end? We're often told that a vaccine is the only way out, but vaccines usually take years to develop, which means there could be many more cycles of outbreak and lockdown. And sometimes a vaccine never materialises. Take HIV, for example. But for the moment, work on a vaccine is continuing apace in labs around the world. Testing it on people, a vital part of the development process, is tricky though. One way is what's known as a human challenge trial. Ask healthy volunteers to take the vaccine and then be infected deliberately with coronavirus to see what happens. But it's risky and it raises all sorts of ethical questions. I've been discussing this with Sridhar Venkatapuram, Associate Professor of Global Health and Philosophy at King's College London, and Art Caplan, Professor of Bioethics at New York University School of Medicine, who's one of the foremost proponents of these kinds of trials.
Well, a standard trial involves recruiting tens of thousands of people, giving them a vaccine, and then waiting for nature to infect them. If the virus that is out there ebbs and flows or we tamp it down, then you may wind up not having enough people infected to tell whether it's a safe and effective vaccine. A challenge study says we're going to jump ahead. We're going to deliberately infect people who've been vaccinated with a purified form of the virus. And that way, we'll only need to use hundreds, not tens of thousands of subjects. And we'll certainly get it in far less time because we're going to be observing the people who are in this experiment.
And how much risk is there to those taking part? Presumably some will get ill and some of those will get very ill.
Well, you want to select subjects so that you minimize risk. That means taking younger subjects. We know that the hospitalization and death rates for people, say, 20 to 35 are extremely low. Probably the risk is on a par with donating a kidney to help a loved one. But I think that somewhat justifies this measure to speed up the search for a vaccine.
Is there any element of control in these trials?
Well, you can certainly run a mock vaccination group. I personally don't see the need to do that because there are so many matched populations that you can just observe. The key ethically is going to be telling people the risk, the unknowns, saying to them, we don't have a way to rescue you other than the standard hospitalizations, which we see, but there's no pill that can save you should you become ill, and making sure their participation is freely elected and altruistic.
Well, let me bring in Professor Venkatapuram on that point. Is this acceptable, this sort of trial, from an ethical point of view, do you think?
The general starting position is that this is an extraordinary situation and we need to make extraordinary allowances in the way that we do research. The second thing that's really important for us to recognize is that this is not a natural disaster or a natural event. These are infections that are passed from person to person, and there are things that we can do to prevent it. So within the actual challenge studies, we select a group of people that are younger, that are very healthy, that are educated and able to consent freely, and then we're going to expose them to this harm. But the actual situation is that the people that are dying are not younger. They're much older people, and they're people who come from disadvantaged backgrounds and have a variety of multimorbidities. So the question is, what will this actually translate to in terms of the benefits for the people who actually are dying?
Just to be clear, do you accept, though, that a vaccine is the only way out of this, particularly the only way out of the lockdowns, which we know are extremely harmful to millions of people?
No, the vaccine has become one of the ways that we come out of it. Think about the HIV and how we've come out of it without a vaccine. There are many things that we can do in order to prevent transmissions. And that's exactly what we're in the process of doing in lifting lockdowns, is trying to ensure that there are things that work in terms of the way that people travel, in terms of how they relate to each other in order to prevent infections.
Professor Caplan, are we, as a whole, focusing too much on a vaccine as the way out of this?
I don't think so. I think it's not just a tool. I think it's the most important tool. Vaccines really are what has really helped us with many, many infectious diseases. Obviously, you want to pursue therapies, medicines that can help cure people. And that's what we have for HIV right now, although it took us 10 years to find those medicines in combinations. And behavior modification, lock-ins and quarantines and travel restrictions, they help too, but they're obviously very, very difficult to comply with. So I see a higher priority on vaccination, and the fastest route to that is the challenge study.
And on the question about doing the tests on people who are less likely to get seriously ill, young people, is that going to give you data that isn't particularly useful given that it's older people who seem to be getting much more ill?
Well, remember, every study, whether it's what I'm proposing, a rapid challenge study with deliberate infection, or the usual standard tens of thousands of people waiting for nature, they both start off heavily with young people. Kind of ironically, if you go to the challenge study and you can see if it's safe and it does some good in that young population, then you're actually taking steps more quickly toward trying it in older people.
Professor Venkatapuram, from an ethical point of view and just focusing on these trials, if you have people coming forward, and I understand there are lots of people coming forward saying they're willing to take part, what is the ethical problem?
Well, saying that as long as people are volunteering and we can identify that they are showing sound mind, that therefore whatever they consent to is ethical, I think would be not the way to do this. We have to situate this particular issue in a much broader context of what is going on, why are we doing it, who's going to benefit from it. Most of these vaccines, particularly in the United States, are run by private companies, and therefore we're using the benefit of altruistic feelings of individuals for a commercial purpose without guaranteeing that everybody's going to benefit. So there's many steps to go between a vaccine trial, whatever the way it does, and actually getting it to the benefit of everyone.
Professor Caplan, just to round off, I mean, how optimistic are you about a vaccine? And is the risk in these trials to some people, and you say it's a small risk, is that worth it for the greater good?
I think it is worth it. But I do think the issue of who gets the benefit is crucial, but I don't think it's related to how we do the studies. I think going faster with the challenge study will get us answers. If we don't go faster, I worry that the damage done by this particular pandemic will be way, way more costly.
And that was Professor Art Caplan from New York University School of Medicine. I was also talking to Sridhar Venkatapuram from King's College London. Don't forget, as ever, there is much more on the pandemic on our website. Lots of background and analysis and indeed basic information, useful information. It's all at bbc.com/news. But that's it for this edition of the programme from me and the rest of the team here in London. Thanks for being with us. Until the next time, take care. Bye-bye.